Sergeant Mashari Dunbar did 2 back-to-back deployments beginning in 2007 in Iraq. She told National Public Radio's StoryCorps Project Military Initiative, "I used to do Patriot details, which is when a soldier or an airman or Marine or sailor is killed in action. You line up in 2 columns up to the back of a C-130, and you give them final salute as they are loaded onto the plane. Not that many people showed up to do it. The first time I volunteered for one, I really didn't even know what it was. I thought maybe it was going to be just 1 or 2 coffins. But they just kept coming, one after the other, and then another, and another. I don't know how many I sent home that first time, but there was honor in it, and someone had to do it. Someone had to send them home. And so after that, I volunteered almost every time they needed someone, even if I just come off a 14-hour shift. But then we just move on to the next day, and it was just business as usual." Sergeant's partner, Barb Maglicky, asks her, "Did you feel guilty about that?" And she replied, "I guess somewhere deep down I do, because I made it back." In Iraq and Afghanistan, in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation New Dawn and Operation Enduring Freedom, there were 6,800 some odd other photos that I did not show you from the other 49 states. Soldiers who have died in service. They are pictures mostly of men, but not all. There are now many women among the fallen. They are mostly between the ages of 20 and 24, but not all. Their lives and their deaths having affected many during their brief time on this earth. In another recording from that same project of getting the voices down of the servicemen, Gordon Bowler tells StoryCorps founder Dave Isay about his son, Army Specialist Matthew Bowler from Kalamazoo, Michigan, who was killed in Iraq in 2007. He said, "My son was a young man who knew what he wanted to do, and military service was the way that he chose to go." The interviewer asked, "Did he call you and tell you that he had joined the service?" "He did. I could kind of see it coming, and I knew I couldn't talk him out of it. I just wanted to acquaint him with all the implications of his choice, but he knew those. His first tour of duty was in Mosul. I will not forget the day that he called me and said, 'I had to bury my sergeant today. We tried to revive him and we couldn't.' So he knew all about the casualties in the field. He'd seen them right in his lap. And he chose to volunteer again and go back for a second tour. Ironically, he called me about a week to 10 days before he was killed in action. He said, 'You know, I heard there was a shooting on campus at a university in the United States, and that's all I know, and I know that you work on a campus, Dad, and I just wanted to call to make sure that you were okay.' Now, of course, I was fine. But here he was in a combat situation, and he was calling me to make sure that I was okay." That was the last phone conversation I ever had with him. Matthew was killed on a road south of Baghdad. The next morning, his father says, he went to the bedroom window and looked out and saw a uniformed Army sergeant and a uniformed chaplain standing at my doorstep. And you tell yourself, maybe they're going to tell me he's wounded. But you know. I want Matthew to be remembered as somebody who cared about other people, who cared about his family back home. And he served his country, and that was his highest calling. And he did it with honor. And that's how I want him to be remembered. The custom of honoring those who've given their lives in military service can be traced back through all of recorded history for as long as there have been wars. The ancient Greeks and the Romans held annual days of remembrance for their loved ones, including soldiers, every year, adorning their graves with flowers and holding public festivals and feasts in their honor. In Athens, public funerals for fallen soldiers were held after each battle, with the remains of the dead on display for public mourning before a funeral procession took them to their interment. In the United States, there is quite a controversy over who inspired the first national holiday. What we do know is that our modern version of Memorial Day officially began with an order issued in 1868 for the annual decoration of war graves. And since 1948, the weekend of the Memorial Holiday, Arlington National Cemetery and American veteran cemeteries around the country and around the globe, a single American flag will decorate each grave. It's called Flags In. At Arlington National Cemetery alone, that's more than 260,000 gravestones, and about 7,300 niches at the cemetery's columbarium. American flags are also placed at the graves of each of the 4 unknown servicemen interred in the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier by the Tomb Sentinels. Old Guard soldiers remain in the cemetery throughout the weekend, ensuring that a flag remains at each gravestone. And then all of the flags are removed after Memorial Day before each cemetery is opened again to the public. There are stunning photos online of row after row of uniform white headstones, each with a flag honoring those who died for a cause greater than themselves. It was on May 5th, 1868, just 3 years after the Civil War ended, when the head of the Grand Army of the Republic, an organization of Union veterans, established what was called Decoration Day. It was a time for the nation to decorate the graves of those who had died during their military service. Now, according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Major General John A. Logan declared that day should be observed on May 30th. It is believed that that date was chosen because flowers would be in bloom all over the country. The first recognized national observance was held that same year in 1868 at Arlington National Cemetery across from the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. The holiday was celebrated on May 30th until the Uniform Monday Holiday Act of 1968, which shifted the holiday to make it the last Monday in May. That move has not been without controversy. Many veterans groups are concerned that more Americans associate this holiday with the first long weekend of the summer instead of its intended purpose of honoring our nation's war dead, and they continue to lobby for a return to May 30th observances. What inspired this national holiday is also up for debate. There were towns from the North and South that had large celebrations for their fallen that included decorating graves before Logan's nationwide claim. Over 25 different American towns claimed to be the American origin of the celebration. But one story stands out in particular that I believe we need to know and share as part of our history. In 2002, Professor David Blight published a book titled Race and Reunion: The Civil War in American Memory. He did it through Harvard University Press. And in that book, he tells a story that has been forgotten or possibly even suppressed for 130 years. It was the first multiracial decoration celebration of soldiers in America. Free blacks in Charleston reburied dead Union prisoners of war. It was May 1st, 1865, at the graveyard of 257 Union soldiers in Charleston, South Carolina. This was less than a month after General Lee surrendered to Grant, and just 2 weeks after President Lincoln was shot and Andrew Johnson took office. The first Decoration Day, as this event came to be recognized in some circles in the North, involved an estimated 10,000 people. During the month of April, as the nation grieved the death of their president and the war was slowly coming to an end, 28 black men from one of the local churches built a suitable enclosure for the burial ground at a former racetrack. In 10 days, they constructed a fence 10 feet high, enclosing the burial ground, and they landscaped the graves into neat rows. A wooden fence was then whitewashed and an archway was built over the gate. And at 9 o'clock in the morning on May 1st, the procession to this special cemetery began. 3,000 African-American school children who had just been newly enrolled in the Freedmen schools that very week marched around the cemetery, each with an armload of roses, singing John Brown's Body. Now, there are many different versions of this song, but it was in hearing the soldiers of the Massachusetts 12th singing this tune, and at the urging of James Freedman Clark, that Unitarian Julia Ward Howe was inspired to write the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So it will be familiar to you in tune. But I'd like you to close your eyes for just a moment and imagine this scene just at the end of the Civil War with 3,000 children with arms full of flowers, singing the song that you'll now hear the choir sing for you.
John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on. John Brown died that the slaves might be free. John Brown died that the slaves might be free. John Brown died that the slaves might be free. His soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on. The stars above in heaven now are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven now are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven now are looking kindly down on the grave of old John Brown. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on.
Can you imagine 10,000 people gathered, 3,000 children of color singing around 260 some odd graves? The deaths of soldiers have transformed our nation, have impacted generations and continue to do so. And at this first Decoration Day, those present were united by a common mission to see the living walk free. They were united by a common tragedy, the death of so many fathers and brothers, sisters and mothers, daughters and sons. Memorial Day is but once a year. But if the purpose is to mourn the dead, remember the living, and offer gratitude for the sacrifice of those who have come before us, then let every Sunday be a Memorial Day. That song those 3,000 school children sang about John Brown, for those of you who do not know or may have forgotten, John Brown was a white abolitionist and a controversial figure who repeatedly used violence against slave supporters and who was tried in Virginia for treason and hanged in 1859. After his conviction and before his hanging, John Brown made a speech to the court, and I want to read some of it here for you. Had I so interfered on behalf of the rich and the powerful, the intelligent, the so-called great, or on behalf of any of their friends, either father, mother, brother, sister, wife, or children, or any of that class, and suffered and sacrificed what I have in this interference, it would have been all right. And every man in this court would have deemed it an act worthy of reward rather than punishment. This court acknowledges, as I propose, the validity of the law of God. I see a book kissed here, which I suppose to be the Bible, or at least the New Testament, that teaches me that all things whatsoever I would that men should do to me, I should do even so to them. It teaches me further to remember them that are in bonds as bound with them. I endeavored to act upon the second instruction. I believe that to have interfered as I have done, as I have always freely admitted I have done on behalf of his despised poor, was not wrong, but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice, and mingle my blood further with the blood of my children and with the blood of the millions in this slave country whose rights are disgraced by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I submit, so let it be done. There is no easy answer to righting systemic wrongs like slavery or genocide. On that first Decoration Day, black and white came together in the midst of all of that complexity to honor those who gave their lives for a higher purpose in service of others, so that we might live in freedom together. Following those 3,000 children singing, it is reported that 300 African American women from the Patriotic Association, a group organized to distribute clothing and other goods among the freed people, carried baskets of flowers and wreaths and crosses to the burial ground. Following those women, the Mutual Aid Society, a benevolent association of African American men, marched in cadence around the track and into the cemetery, and they were followed by a large crowd of white and black citizens, bringing the numbers up to 10,000. According to the Charleston newspaper reporter, all those who gathered dropped their spring blossoms on the graves, and when all had left, those holy mounds, the tops, the sides, and every space between them were one mass of flowers. Not a speck of earth could be seen. And as the breeze wafted the sweet perfumes from them outside and beyond, there were few eyes among those who knew the meaning of the ceremony that were not dim with tears of joy. How radical a movement to choose beauty in the face of tragedy, to risk hope for a greater cause. While the adults marched from the graves, he goes on, the children were gathered in a nearby grove while they were singing America and we'll rally round the flag and the Star-Spangled Banner. United across race and class and education, young and old, for a single purpose: to honor those who died to free the slaves. There was an official dedication ceremony after, with prayer, the reading of biblical passages, and the singing of spirituals. Charlestonians gave birth to an American tradition. In doing so, they declared the meaning of the war in the most public way possible, by their labor, their words, their songs, and their solemn parade of roses and lilacs and the marching of feet. After the dedication, the crowds gathered at the racecourse grandstand to hear some 30 speeches by Union officers, local black ministers, and abolitionist missionaries. Picnics ensued around the grounds, and in the afternoon, a full brigade of Union infantry of mixed races marched in double column around the martyrs' graves. The war was over, and Declaration Day was a day of hope, a day of unity, a day of freedom and inclusion. And today, I'm not sure everyone knows the significance of the hour, but I believe we are called to pay attention to it. Today, it is not just young men or men who are among the dead. There are many more women. Today, the people of color who risked their lives for this country are as varied as those living in it. This Memorial Weekend, our African American president declared, "Every single one of us owes our fallen heroes a profound debt of gratitude, because every time we cast our votes or speak our minds without fear, it is because they fought for our right to do that. Every chance we get to make a better life for ourselves and our families, it is possible because generations of patriots fought to keep America a land of opportunity. Our country was born out of a desire to be free, and every day since, it's been protected by our men and women in uniform, people who believe so deeply in America that they were willing to give their lives for it." And so today, let us remember the fallen, but not just that they have fallen. Let us remember the vision that they had of this world when they fell. So says the poet, "They have done what they could, but until it is finished, it is not done. Until it is finished, no one can know what their lives gave. Their deaths are not theirs, they are ours. They will mean what we make them. They have died, and we remember them. But let every Sunday, in fact, be a Memorial Day, where we live out a vision of an America dreamed about on that first Decoration Day in Charleston, with Americans of all colors singing together, praying together, joining together in the spirit of that which unites all people, a desire to live out our freedom, knowing that one day our own death will indeed come, and hoping that we can contribute our gifts to the common good before that day arrives. This Memorial Day, let us declare that a human life is sacred. It is sacred in its being born, it is sacred in its living, and it is sacred even in its dying. As we take time to honor the fallen, we cover the graves of our mighty cloud of witnesses, those men and women who have inspired us to live out a vision well beyond what we could possibly imagine ourselves. Let us declare mercy never ceasing and call for songs of highest praise. Let us declare that even in the face of war, there is still goodness in the world. Let us declare our service to one another and help our hands tell of our love. Amen.